It's Lucy Litch, and this is Tiny House Conversations. It's the Australian-based podcast where I interview experienced tiny houses, tiny builders, and adventurers in the tiny world so you can discover how to create, build, and transition into tiny life. Welcome back to Tiny House Conversations. Today I'm speaking with Clare Lovelace, who's a dear friend of mine, originally from the UK, and we met in Sydney at yoga several years ago, and Clare now lives down in the South Coast of New South Wales in Batemans Bay, and she's also the owner of the yoga studio down there called Soul Tribe Studio. Now, on this show, we talk all about tiny houses and the tiny lifestyle, and today I wanted to do something a little different and still continuing the conversation around small space living, but in this episode, focusing on van life. I've asked Clare to join me on the show today to talk about her experiences living in her van full-time a few years ago. And in this conversation, we talk about Clare's decision and inspiration to pack up her life in Sydney, buy a van and live the van life, the profound shift she experienced and lessons learned from living this way, the challenges of living in a van. We also talked about the beauty of simple living and being a minimalist, why Clare stopped living in her van and how she put her roots down, still small space living, in Batemans Bay, where in my opinion she put yoga and conscious living on the map, and so much more. Now let's go hang out and chat with Clare. Hey Clare, welcome to Tiny House Conversations, and thanks so much for being here with me today, darling.
Hi Lucy, thank you so much for having me. I'm so honoured to be here.
I'm honoured to have you, and I'm excited to talk with you today. And, you know, Clare, before you left Sydney several years ago, you did a stint of living the van life, which took you down to settling in Batemans Bay for the past few years. And you're no longer living in your van now, but what I'd love to do today is, take things back to your van life experiences, and then we'll move into how you're living now and talk about what you're doing and creating down in Batemans Bay. Does that sound good?
Yeah, that sounds great.
All right. So would love if you're able to take us back to what inspired you to pack up your life in Sydney those years ago, buy a van and live in it full time.
Yeah, such a good question. So I really felt a strong calling to be immersed in a natural environment most of the time. And I've been living in Sydney for about 4 years. Before that, the last kind of 10 years had been very transient, a lot of travel, a lot of different countries, that kind of thing. But in Sydney, I really started to build a home and meet some incredible friends, including you. And in Sydney was where I really started to live my purpose, and that's where I started teaching yoga. So Sydney was really where everything kind of fell into place. And I just think that's an important part of the story, because it was even more kind of out there for me to just leave it all behind, because I was really starting to connect in Sydney and really follow my purpose. But even though I loved what I was doing, I lived in a great house with some really good friends. I loved my life, and I was teaching yoga, my dream job, all over the place. But I just knew that I had to be out, like in the wild, basically. And I was living in Marrickville at the time, which is in a city, and I really just needed to be near the ocean, and I'd go to the ocean as often as I could. But anyone that knows Sydney, it's like not that far, but it can be a nightmare driving around. And I just felt like I wasn't getting out into nature anywhere near as much as I wanted to. And I just wanted to live in a really free, wild way. I didn't want to be in a city anymore. So that was really the driving force that propelled me to to take that massive leap and just to say, you know what, I'm doing it. And it's one of those things that people around me would talk about, and I was talking about it all the time, like, yeah, I'm going to live in a van. And then, yeah, one day I was just like, you know what, I'm actually just going to do this.
I love it. I love it, putting things into action. And I guess it's so much in alignment with, you know, this tiny house way of living, and even with yoga, it's like continuing to reconnect with, you know, what's most important and where we came from in our natural environment, and having that deeper connection, as you say, to like being by the ocean and being out in nature, much more than, you know, what I guess many of us, at least I'll speak for myself, in living in cities for a long time. Yeah, I definitely feel the same, as like not being immersed in it as much as I would like to be. So I love that, hearing about your inspiration around all of that. It's beautiful.
Yeah, like honestly, it was like seeing the sunrises, seeing the sunsets. I remember I went to some workshop, and the teacher, he was saying, it's so important to get that first light into your eyes and to watch the sunrise. And I remember sitting there thinking, I can't ever see the sun because I live in this inner city, and it's like it's always covered by buildings. And it was just like, no, like this isn't right. This isn't where I need to be. Yeah.
Exactly. And I think there's a difference between, you know, going for a bushwalk on the weekend or actually being outside and living in a small space like you did with your van, that I guess also pushes you to be outside a lot more, because you're in a small space and don't necessarily want to spend all your time there, and you're able to be more connected. So I love that. And transitioning from your life in Sydney to living in a van, you know, obviously living in a smaller space and needing to downsize and all those things. I'd love to know, you know, what was your process like for downsizing so that you could live in your van?
Yeah. I feel like I'm quite an extreme person. Like I'm kind of like all or nothing. So, and I also like to keep things very simple. I The shadow side of that could be that I can be quite lazy, but I actually don't think that that's a bad thing anymore. I just really like simplicity. So where lots of people might go in for, you know, a really intricate van setup and getting really into like, this is what it's going to be like, and doing it up really beautifully. I mean, I love looking at that, but for me it was like, nah, you know what, there is a bed. There was a tiny little, is still a tiny little fridge in my van that's connected to solar panels on top of it. I was like, that's enough. Like, I'm good with this. And my van is very, very simple and very small. It's basically like a Ford kind of work van converted. So I did it really simply, and I guess you could say in a way quite extremely. So I was living in this place called Marrickville. I didn't really have that much stuff anyway, because I had been traveling over the years a lot. I'd spent lots of time living out of a backpack and that kind of thing. So I was already very aware of not accumulating stuff, because I had this this inner knowing that at any time I might want to do exactly what I was doing and pack my whole life up. So I didn't have really any furniture or stuff like that. So the process was, I found the van. It was really cheap. It only cost $3,000, which is so amazing. And got a mechanic friend to check it all out. And engine was really sound, and it had just been converted by this like German couple, and then they had to leave. So it was all just so perfect timing, perfect price. Because I really didn't have much money at the time either. But the first thing that I did then was like, okay, I'm just going to throw a garage sale. And all my other friends that were living in this house with me, they were leaving the house as well and moving on to different things. So we started hosting little garage sales every weekend, just put a little sign up, and people would come by, and, you know, the little stuff that I did have, I just got rid of it. I just sold it, or most of the time I just gave it away. But it was basically just clothes and, you know, the odd bits and bobs. But I went quite extreme, because I was just like, I don't need anything. I started really really enjoying getting rid of everything. And so I put everything out on the street, like even, I don't know, clothes and jewelry and stuff that I actually really, really loved. And at first I was like, no, I want to keep this, I want to keep that. And at first I was sorting through things, but then I was just like, no, I'm just going to put it all out and just get rid of it all, because the space that I had to store stuff in the van was tiny anyways. And I was like, I don't need any of this stuff. So that was just this full like, nah, I don't need it. And so I got rid of really everything. And that's how I did it. And then then I realized that I didn't really have any clothes at all. But luckily it was just this sign of, we get rid of everything, the universe always provides. And then a friend of mine was like, oh, I heard that you're traveling, you're going down south this winter, you might need some warm clothes. I'm assuming that you don't have any because I know you, so here's a bunch of warm stuff. Like a week later. So luckily that was I got some clothes back. But yeah, it was just this really freeing, liberating experience of getting rid of really everything. Like, I don't know, pictures and even things I thought held sort of sentimental value. I just felt like, nah, I just want this completely clean slate. And it felt amazing. And I've never regretted getting rid of anything or missed anything. So yeah, that was pretty radical. And yeah, I moved out of that house and it all happened really quickly. And I remember leaving the house and then just kind of getting in the van, and there was this feeling of like, oh my God, like, what have I done? Like, is this my life? Like, now I just live like in this van. And it was quite, it was so freeing, a little bit scary, just so new, to think, wow, I don't have like a base anymore. It's just me in this van. I kind of felt like a snail, like carrying everything on my back in a sense, like everything that I had in the world was like in this van that was portable. So it was just such an incredible feeling, and I had no plan whatsoever. So I literally just sort of started driving, and I was just like, right, I'm just going to drive and then see what happens.
That so sounds like you, right? I love that.
Yeah, I know. And everyone else had their super fancy, like cooking setup and this setup and that setup. And I would just be like there sitting in my bed. You couldn't really even sit up in it, but just like crouched down, like, and I couldn't really bother to cook either. So I just ate like the cheapest thing that I could find at the time, which was like big bags of carrots and then like peanut butter. And I just eat carrots and peanut butter like every night.
Oh, that's so funny. So did you eat them together, like dip the carrot in the peanut butter?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
amazing.
Exactly.
What I'm hearing there from you, so it feels like there's actually a lot of life lessons within that, really living within your means, going back to basics and actually assessing what is it that I really need to live and what's most important. Yeah. And then also, as you're talking about, having this feeling of freedom, and then, just driving off in your van in uncertainty into the unknown, but also, I guess, needing to have this sense of trust in just, this is what I'm doing now, and being open to whatever life puts in your path from that way forward. And I think it sounds like such an exciting journey at the same time,
Yeah, it's definitely, you've summed it up really, really beautifully. It was just this feeling of, I'm just going to surrender everything and just let go of it all. And that, it was so happy that I did. And it was, definitely it was scary though. There was part of me that was like, oh, what am I doing? Like, I'm doing so well in Sydney. I'm making good money and teaching yoga. I'm doing what I love. Like, why am I just leaving it all? And I've got all these friends and all the rest of it. But I just knew that it was what I had to do. And the more that I let go of, the more I let go, the more came to me and came my way.
Yeah. Sounds like I guess calling, something deeper, calling you to explore.
Definitely.
And
definitely. It was almost like I didn't have a choice. Like, I was really being it felt like I was really being dragged by some kind of force greater than myself. And I think that because I'd done that a couple of times. Well, I'd definitely done that when I left England, as in started going traveling around the world. It was the same kind of thing. I just felt this kind of pull, and same thing, you know, I just got rid of everything and packed a tiny bag. And so because I'd done that, I think that I was much more like, there was definitely fear there, but mostly I was just like, it's always going to work out. Things are always going to work out. But I could never have imagined how beautifully it would have all flown from there.
Yeah, for sure. Watching your journey has been such an honor, and so, yeah, just so beautiful to witness. So I'm grateful to see how everything has turned out for you. And you know, before you talked about with your van, it being very simplistic and what it contained. So I'm wondering, you know, when you were living in it full time, what were you doing for things like showers and toilets and those types of things?
Yeah, so again, very simple. So for toilets, I would just be using like little, like wherever I was. I was usually staying at beaches. And there would always be like a little beach toilet, something like that. I never actually stayed at like official campsites or camping grounds. So I was usually just using like whatever little public toilet was around. I mean, if I was doing a wee, like I would just wee anywhere. Like didn't
Bush
really use
toilets.
toilets for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did use that a lot, bush toilets. Yeah, and then for showers, I didn't really shower that much. I would swim in the ocean, and it was cold. It was like winter when I first left and when I was first living in the van. But yeah, I would just swim in the ocean, and that was it really. Again, sometimes one of these, like where the beaches that I was staying at, they would have a little block with showers in them. They were usually cold, but again, I didn't mind. I was just like, yeah. So yeah, I just either didn't shower or swam. Yeah.
Perfect. It sounds like you made it work for you. And I know it's been a few years, but I'm also wondering if you're able to maybe also take us back to those first few weeks of adjusting to that new way of living. You know, do you remember like what that was like for you and what came up for you in those first few weeks?
Yeah, I remember feeling like just such a sense of freedom and relief about having no responsibilities. So I'd gone from teaching lots of different jobs and having a very full schedule and always having to think like, oh, what am I doing now? What am I doing now? So I remember this feeling of spaciousness, of not having anything that I had to do, and just complete freedom. Like I could go anywhere, I could sleep anywhere, I could drive anywhere, and knew that I could always just stop at the side of the road or anywhere I was and sleep. So definitely I felt really free. I remember really enjoying starting to tune in more and more with the moon and the stars at night, and camping next to beaches and watching the sun go down. Always going to sleep really, really early, which I was doing before, but this was like next level early, because as soon as it got dark, it was like, well, there's nothing else to do, and it's not like I had any kind of living space whatsoever. So yeah, I just read my book. I had a little light and I'd go to sleep. So like I was going to sleep probably like 7 p.m. or something. And yeah, just waking up like with the light and getting out and just watching the sunrise. I remember that just being so, so beautiful. I remember like all the sounds. So I think it took me a little while to get used to, like, depending on where I was. But it was, yeah, usually quite remote beaches. And I remember just the sounds of like the rain on the roof, how loud it was, but beautiful. The sounds of nature, the sounds of the wind, the sounds of like animals walking around outside. And I remember like kind of choosing where to sleep was like quite a big thing. So sometimes I would get like a feeling like, no, I shouldn't I shouldn't stay here, or no, I should stay here. And sometimes I'd be sort of driving around for a while, like trying to feel into a good place to sleep. Sometimes I'd just be really tired, and so I just end up, I don't know, sleeping on the side of the road. So it was definitely a little bit of an adjustment in terms of that, like not knowing where I was going to be. But then I also loved that as well, and I loved that if I found somewhere that I liked, I could just kind of stay there for as long as I wanted. And I just remember this such a sense of spaciousness and gratitude that I was just really like out in nature. I started writing a lot and sharing a lot of writing, like writing essentially a blog, I guess you could say. It was on my Instagram, but sharing a lot of my journey, and that was a really beautiful way to express myself and then to connect with others around me. And other people were really interested and really engaged with what I was doing, which was really beautiful. Yeah
And you're a really great writer. Like, you do express yourself really nicely, so it was it's always really nice to read what you write and what you're experiencing. And what you were talking about there before, going to bed really early and then getting up with the sun, and it's like returning to living in alignment with nature's cycles. I remember over 10 years ago when I lived in Africa, and I was living in a much simple way. We didn't have running water. We didn't have electricity except for a generator at like 8 o'clock in the evening, or maybe it was even in the middle of the day, actually. Yeah, middle of the day. And I remember going to bed, like it would get dark and we'd have candles inside, but like shortly after the sun went down, I'd be in bed, and then you get up at like 5 a.m. and the sun is up, and it was just the most just a really beautiful way to live, and not feeling tired, and feeling just so much more connected to the outside world, and again to what's important, and not needing anything more than that. So I can definitely resonate.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's such a beautiful natural rhythm that I got into really quickly, actually. I think I just realized how like overstimulated I'd been for quite a few years in the city. It was just so beautiful to slip into that natural rhythm, which I did really quickly. And just being outside as much as possible and all the time was just so special. Yeah.
So a remembering of what makes us human, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly. And just the simplicity of it all, like, and I realized really quickly as well, like, I don't need anything. Like, I actually don't need anything. And I don't really need much money at all either, because I'm so self-sufficient, as in all I need is a little bit of maybe a little bit of fuel money, a little bit of money to take to buy food. And again, my food was really, really super simple. And it was just really, it's just such a simple way to live. So that was just such a great reminder. And then I was like, oh wow, I've really overcomplicated my life in lots of different ways over the years.
It's the nature of modern life and our modern world that we've all created together, I suppose. And I'm also wondering, when you were living in your van, what was maybe one of the most challenging things for you about living in that way?
To be honest, it was like I remember the logistics of just finding my stuff, even though I didn't have very much stuff, but just keeping my things like semi-organized and like washing my clothes. I remember that was a challenge, and I only had like one towel, and the towel was like always dirty or wet. And I remember like going to laundrettes and things like that to wash my clothes. So I do remember that feeling of like, oh, everything's kind of gross and stinks. And yeah, like periodically, I'd get everything out of the van and air it all out on a nice sunny day. But yeah, I think like not having any space, that was definitely, as in like I had loads of space in my life, but not having any space in the van, because it was such a simple setup, like I didn't really have any storage. That was definitely challenging. How things could just so quickly just be like everywhere, and I just couldn't find things all the time. So I do remember that being a challenge. Yeah, like I had like the odd random incident. Like I remember once, quite really, really early on, I was staying at down a beach somewhere, and I think I was just sort of on the road and hadn't really found a great place to park up for the night. And I went to sleep, and then I like heard this massive like bang 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 like on the van, on the side of the van, and I was like, oh my god, like what was that? It was really scary. And then this car like driving off really fast, and I didn't know what it was, and I just was really freaked out. And my van, I couldn't climb into the front seat from the back seat, so like I couldn't just drive off. I had to like get out, and I remember being really scared. And then in the morning, like I drove somewhere else, and in the morning I was like, what even was that? And I looked at the side of the van, and there was just like eggs like on the van. So it just was like kids throwing eggs in the van. It was like nothing. But at the time, in the middle of the night, it was like super scary. So I remember that a few times just getting a bit freaked out about stuff like that. But generally, I felt great.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, do you have any other interesting or funny or memorable stories around that time you were living in your van?
Well, I've got a story, but it's a little bit scary. But it was like a story that was, a time where I felt scared, and I was woken up really by this amazing intuition. So another time I was sleeping in the van, and this was, I was living in my van at the time, and I've been living in it for a little while and been doing the odd random house sit and stuff like that. And I'd actually come back into the city, back into Sydney, just to do a teacher training or something like that. I think it was something to do with some work that I had on, whether I was attending one or running one, I can't remember. But anyway, I was staying in the city that night in my van, and I'd parked there before at this one place, and I thought, oh, it's totally fine. And I remember getting there in the evening, and I just kind of had a weird vibe about staying there, but I was tired, and I was just like, oh, I can't be bothered to go anywhere else, even though I had loads of friends in Sydney that I could have stayed at anyone's house. But I was just like in my own vibe, and I didn't really feel like talking to anyone or anything like that. So yeah, I just parked up at this place and went to sleep. And then in the middle of the night, I had this dream that there was someone outside, like this evil presence that was trying to get me. And it was a really strong, vivid dream. And it woke me up. And the first thing that happened when I woke up was I just looked over, and I realized that I hadn't locked the side sliding door properly, which like was really good with that stuff usually. I was like, oh wow, okay. And I reached over to lock it, and then like literally like 3 seconds later, this hand came out of the dark and went to open the door. So, and there was this man outside like trying to get into the van, which was just so terrifying. It's not really a funny story, but
memorable though.
Yeah, very memorable. And that was probably one of the most scared that I've been in my life ever, because he was really like trying to get in, and my van is not extremely secure really. I mean, it wouldn't take that much to break into it at all. But the fact that I just left the door open, this dream woke me up, and it was like I locked it, and then like 3 seconds later he tried to open it. So that was just so terrifying. And then I was lying there in the dark, like trying to find my phone, and then I was trying to call like the police, and I'd never called like the emergency number before, and I'm from England, so the first number that I tried to call was like 999, and then I was like, oh, that's not the number. So I was like, okay, what's the number? All right, yeah, like 000, okay. And then I was like hiding my phone under the pillow and trying to call, and meanwhile he was like walking around and around the van, and it was just like this really like dark presence, like trying to get in, and it was so scary. But luckily, I got hold of the police, and they came relatively quickly. And I don't know what happened. The guy just ran off or whatever. But yeah, that was really, really scary. But at the same time, like, I don't want to put anyone off living in a van, because it is so incredible. And that one incident is like the only scary thing that ever happened to me. And it was in the city. So that's like, I've stayed in so many places in the middle of absolutely nowhere, like, and everywhere that I've stayed, like down the coast in nature, has always been so fine. So I think the lesson there is, like, it was in the city. It was kind of in like, yeah, like in the inner city. And I also had this bad feeling before I slept there. So it's like, always trust your intuition, because I knew there was something telling me don't sleep there, and I ignored it. It was definitely scary, and it was definitely like I felt really grateful that my dream, my intuition, whatever you want to call it, woke me up. And then it was such a strong reminder to always trust my instincts.
Yeah, now that you mentioned that story, I do remember you telling me back at the time, and I know that that would have freaked me out as well. Like, and I just find it so incredible that you had that vision in your dream, and I guess there was this expansion of your consciousness and your intuition in some way that was I guess teaching you a lesson, I suppose, on some level. And even though it was scary, I guess sometimes, we have to go through these things in order to be like, okay, I got to trust myself, or I got to trust my intuition, or I've got to learn this lesson. And thankfully, all the good experiences crowd out ones like that. So
definitely. Yeah, definitely. And for that one experience, like, I had just thousands and thousands of incredible experiences, like just waking up in the most incredible places ever, and just watching like every single sunrise and every single sunset. And yeah, just had so many opportunities come my way, and so many beautiful and unexpected things happened. Yeah, and because I was sharing my journey a lot on my social media channel at the time, I love to paint as well, and I had bought my like watercolor paints with me, just this little kind of compact paint set, and I started like painting. I called it Love Letters to the World. So I put on my Instagram like, oh, if anyone wants a little postcard, I'll paint you one. And then like all these people started saying, like people that I don't know from all over the world, like, oh, I'd love one. And then I was doing all my painting, and I was like, wow, I'm actually like so busy. I've got all my postcards to post out. And I'd go to the post office and like send these little love letters, like just like little paintings and little poetry that I'd written like all the way around the world. So that was just a really beautiful thing that I just naturally started doing.
Yeah, and I remember you doing that because you sent me a love letter, and I'm pretty sure I still have it. And I'm also pretty sure you painted a watermelon on the front of it. So whatever that inspiration was, yeah.
I think I went through a watermelon phase. I go through lots of phases with things, but yeah, I think I went through a phase of painting watermelons. Yeah,
so funny.
I mean, just having the space to do that, because like even now, like when I was like working or whatever, there's no way in this world that I would have the space to just be like, hey, who wants me to paint them a card? And it was just such a beautiful thing to do, just to have the space to then almost like get bored, even though I was never bored. But when there's this space, then stuff comes out of that. It's like, oh, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. But when we're so just caught up in everything, there's no space to even like feel that creative spark. Yeah,
definitely. And did you ever have any times during that period where you actually were like, one day, I want to quit, like I just want to go back to living in a regular size home? I put that in inverted commas because it's a subjective matter, but did you ever have those times where you just like wanted to go back?
I never wanted to go back. Like, I never wanted to go back to Sydney. I never wanted to go back to the life that I have. But I definitely had times of like, oh, like it would just be so nice to have space and have a shower and be able to and like live in a house again. I definitely did like fantasize about that. And then like pretty quickly, like a friend was like, oh, my parents have gone away for 3 months, like you can house sit their house. So I was actually house sitting for quite a while, quite a few weeks, which was just like so luxurious. It was kind of like my prayers got answered. And then when I did eventually move into like my first little rental, I just really, really, really appreciated everything so much. And I always just vowed that I would never accumulate more stuff than I could fit underneath the bed in my van, which I still have. And I still adhere to that, really, apart from the one thing that I've got absolutely so many of now, and they're all really big and heavy and huge, is loads of plants in massive plant pots. But apart from that, I don't have any furniture. I don't really buy clothes or anything like that at all. So I still feel like I've got that freedom that if it calls to me, I can just be like, yeah, I can live in the van and be totally fine with that.
I guess, yeah, it gives you the opportunity to have the best of both worlds and not have to have all these things that you're like, okay, I feel like I want to go on an adventure or something, but I've got all this stuff, and then having to go through that whole process again. So I'm with you. I'm very much like that as well. And I know that you talked a little bit about this, but maybe you might have some other things to share. I'd love to know what sorts of internal shifts did you experience when you were living the van life?
It's a really good question. I remember feeling a deep sense of connection back to myself, back to nature, and just having that space. At the same time as I moved into the van, I started reading this book called Dreaming Through Darkness by Charlie Morley. And it was all about shadow integration. I had never really heard of that term before, and I didn't know what that was, but it was like perfect timing, because then I had all this time to delve into that book and start to get to know myself on that deeper level and start to do this shadow integration work, which is essentially was for me like looking within myself and going inside and looking at all the different parts of myself that I had rejected over the years, that I wasn't comfortable with, that I wasn't owning, that I was thinking were wrong or bad. And it was a really beautiful time of self-reflection, self-study, self-acceptance, and just really learning to love myself in this deeper way. And I remember feeling really, really proud of myself. I was like, you know what? Like, I did it. I've done it. I'm doing it. Like, I'm not just talking about it. Like, I'm living in the van. Like, I'm completely self-sufficient. I'm completely independent. I'm doing it and I'm living this dream, and I'm not reliant on anything. And that just felt, so beautiful. So yeah, there was definitely some deep inner work happening. I started to reconnect more and more and more with nature, and just with the seasons and the sunrises and the sunsets, and started to write a lot more as well.
It's funny that you mentioned the book Dreaming Through Darkness, because I'm actually rereading that book right now for the second time. And the first time, and I think it was by recommendation from you those years ago, and I listened to the audio book, and now I'm actually reading the physical book. And I love it. And, for anyone that might be interested in checking out that book, I'll put the link in the show notes. It definitely is, I think, one of the best books I've ever read in that genre and that style of books.
I'd really, really highly recommend it. It's just so practical and straightforward, and I learned so much from that book and in that time.
And if there's anyone, Claire, that might be curious or considering wanting to maybe experience living in a van, or even just living in a small space, and it's something that is maybe different to where they are now, do you have any advice or any tips or anything that you want to share with anyone that's new or curious?
I would say it's natural to feel some fear or trepidation, but just know that everything will be okay. You'll always be supported. In terms of living in a small space, like I really feel like less is more. Like the more stuff that you can get rid of, the more stuff that you can cull, the easier it is, because the more stuff you have, it's like the more you have to organize things and find place for things. I would say simple is best, and don't worry about anything. I always say, like, just don't think about it, like don't overthink things, because I think that we can all talk ourselves out of things so easily. And I mean, it's just the way that I am, but I don't like to future forward, or the moment that I realize that my mind is going into like, oh yeah, but then this might happen, or then this might happen, I'm like, no, like stop, just do it. It's like you just got to jump and trust that the net will appear. So yeah, just don't overthink it. And it depends on what kind of person you are. I'm definitely not someone that likes to prepare things at all, so I just like to go for it. I think that you can get really stuck on that like preparatory part, thinking I'm going to do this, I have to find the perfect plan, and it has to be this, and it has to be that, and it has to be that, and then never do it. So I would just go for it, and you can just figure it out along the way.
I think that's really great advice, and it applies to so many things that we do in our lives, doesn't it? And it's taking action and following that internal feeling that obviously something inside of you is stirring, and something inside of you is calling you to whatever it might be. Whether it's living in a van, whether it's living in a tiny house, or some other way of living, or even just something different in your life, like a different path or a different job or a different way of life. And so many lessons in trusting. I tend to be quite like you in terms of just not planning too much. I think I may be like, there's a small part of me that will look up a few different things and have a bit of an idea. But then I think that the more I go down this path, and with yoga and all the healing work that we both do, just the more I go down that path, the more it's easy to let go and just like be in the moment and be present, and just make those decisions as you go. And as you said, like you just figure it out as you go along. And I know I also often think if I ever get caught in the mind of like either worrying about, how things are going to turn out or what's going to happen, and then I remember, hang on a second, everything always works out as it's meant to be, even if it's not the way that you thought it might or you wanted it to. You always land on your feet in some way, even if you fall over first. You get back up again and you just keep going. So
definitely. And when I feel like when we try and overplan things or have this idea of what we think our life should be, then we block what is actually for us. Because I think that what we can imagine in our own limited minds is nowhere near as expansive as what the universe has in store for us.
Exactly. There's always a greater force or a greater power or whatever you want to call it to guide us. And can just bring it back to it's that internal guidance, right? We always know on the inside, we always know. We just got to get out of the way and make it happen and remember it. So yeah,
exactly.
And I'm also curious, Claire, so is there anything, and maybe there's not, but is there anything that you wish you knew back at the start of your own experience of going on that journey of living in your van?
What I would have said to myself if I could go back and speak to myself 4 years ago or whatever it was, I would say don't be in a rush to fill the space. So I quit all my jobs, for example, and I wasn't working. And even though I was really relishing in that, I think there was still part of me that was like, oh, I should do more, or should write more, should put more workshops out there, should do this, should do that. So I would like to tell myself back then, like, hey, it's all coming. You're going to be like busier than you ever could imagine. So just chill out, like let yourself have this time, let yourself rest, and just totally like let go and surrender even more. Because even though I was in total surrender, I definitely had moments of like, oh, what am I doing? I'm not doing anything with my life. I'm just sort of floating around. But in my experience with myself and also talking to other people, it's those floating around periods. Sometimes, people refer to it as the void space, like just having that complete emptiness and just going into the void and clearing all of that space. I would have said to myself, don't be afraid of that. Like, just relish it, enjoy it, like take your time, slow down, instead of, there was always a little bit of like, oh, should do more. Yeah, I remember this beautiful analogy that one of my friends used relatively recently. It's like, there's that saying, when one door closes, another door opens. But people forget about the corridor in between. So when one door closes, there might be this time of like hanging out in the corridor, waiting in the corridor, just being in that void space before the next door opens. So I think that's just really important for all of us, that it's so beautiful and natural, and it's okay to not know what's happening and what's coming up. In fact, it's the only space, the void space is the only space that we can be completely open. And it is scary, it definitely is, but it's the only space where we can be totally open to divine flow. So I would say that, like, don't be afraid of the void, don't be afraid of the seemingly nothingness, because it's actually not nothingness, and there's so much happening within that space. There's so much restoration and creative seeds being sown, even if you don't realize it.
What a lovely insight. And, as you were talking about that, a few things came up for me. Life is this dance of movement and lots of things happening. But then after the movement, there needs to be stillness and space in order, as you say, for creativity to happen and for flow to happen. And, if we never stop to smell the roses, and if we never stop to experience that space and that nothingness, which, by the way, is also who we really are, like our true nature.
Yes,
being
totally.
being comfortable in that stillness and in that peace and that calm and that nothingness is to be comfortable with who we are and with ourselves and with each other. And so it's a really nice reminder to just, to bathe in that when there's an opportunity, because, there'll be times when, okay, life's getting busy again and, there's lots happening. And so just really, relishing that. So I love that reminder. Thank you for sharing that. So Claire, I thought we would switch gears here a little bit. And so you were living in your van for a period of around 9 months. And I know that you talked about how you were house sitting in that period too. And now you've ended up down on the South Coast in Batemans Bay, and you've got your van, but you're no longer living in it. And I'm just wondering, what made you decide to transition out of living in your van and put your roots down in Batemans Bay?
That's such a great question as well. At some stage throughout that van life journey, I was probably living in the van for maybe 6 months, 9 months, but within that time, a little bit of house sitting. Then I went to Peru with you. So I ran into you one day and you were like, oh, I'm going to Peru, like you should come with me. Or I think you just said, I'm going to Peru, and I was just like, I'm coming.
And I'm like, okay.
You were like, sure. I didn't think you just asked me to go at all, but I was like, I'm coming with you. But in Peru, we were working with one of our dear teachers, and he asked me at the time, like, hey, what do you want? What's your intention for being here? Like, really, what questions do you want to ask the plants? And so at the time I was like, oh, like, I've found this place called Batemans Bay. I've been living down there in my van and living quite, wait, what's that word?
Transient.
Thank you. I've been living in this, thank you, in this transient way. And I actually feel like, even though I had this, it wasn't a plan at all, but even though I was like, right, I want to be in the van and I want to travel around, and I had this kind of very rough idea that maybe I would just keep driving around, and wherever I was, I'd contact different yoga studios and say, hey, like, can I teach there? Which is what I've been doing a little bit. But when I got to Peru and started working in a deeper way with myself and with the plants, I realized that, no, actually, I really want to stay in this place. There's something about this place that I love, this place, Batemans Bay, which is funny because it's such a little, like, funny town, Batemans Bay. But the natural surroundings are just so stunning and beautiful. So I said to Jorge, to our teacher, like, this is what I want. I want to put down my roots. I want to build a community. I want to be able to sustain myself. Like, I want to do what I love, which is teaching yoga. And then as soon as we got out of the jungle and we got back to Lima, the very first message that came through was from this woman that I'd met not that long ago, Danny, saying, hey, like, I've created this yoga studio down in Batemans Bay, but I can't run it anymore. All this stuff has happened in my life. So do you want to manage a studio for me? So I just took that as like a massive, like, sign from the universe of like, oh my God, okay, yes, 100%. This is everything that I've been asking for. So she didn't really manage the studio. Like, I got back to Batemans Bay and she basically said, okay, here's the keys to this yoga studio. This is when the rent's due by, and she just like split and like gave me the keys. And so suddenly I was just in charge of this whole business, which had been closed, but this whole studio to do whatever I wanted with, which was terrifying and amazing all at the same time. So then I had loads of rent to pay and I had to find teachers. Well, I didn't have to do anything, I chose to, but I just kind of walked into it blindly. If she'd said at the time, do you want to buy a yoga studio, I would have probably said hell no and like kept on going, because I just didn't want that level of responsibility, or I thought I didn't. But that was 3 years ago now. And so then I just started running the studio, and suddenly I owned a yoga studio. I ended up buying off her, and now I own this yoga studio and I have like 15 teachers, 40 classes a week, millions of retreats and yoga teacher trainings and all the rest of it. So that's basically what stopped me from living in the van anymore, was like, oh my God, I have a whole business to run, and just wasn't very practical trying to run the whole thing like out of my van. So I was living in my van like for the first month or so, and then I was like, oh, this is ridiculous, I need to find somewhere to rent. So then I just started renting a place here in this area, and I've been here ever since. And I've moved a couple of times, and now I've got this beautiful little kind of like a tiny house. It's not really a tiny house, but it's a little kind of cute granny flat that I live in this place called Browley. Again, I didn't have a choice in any of it. I feel like I was just kind of like pushed into it, but I'm very grateful for it. Like, I've never been happier, and I'm extremely honored and humbled by how the divine works and how the universe works, and how now I have this incredible studio that I get to run in the way that I want to run it, and it's amazing.
Yeah, it really is amazing. And I still remember when we were in Peru, and I think we were taking an internal flight, and you were checking your emails, and that email came through about the yoga studio, and then to see everything that's unfolded since that time, after, I guess, we, both of us, but you in particular, for your path, did, all this clearing and deep healing work, and then to see just how quickly all these little things got put into place for you and your path and led you to your yoga studio there. And even though I've been along for the ride and I've been watching you, it's so nice to just hear you reflect on where you came from and what's unfolded now. So, and speaking of the studio, and I've told you this before, but I reckon that you've put Batemans Bay on the map, especially in yoga and, conscious living practices. And I'd love if you're able to share with us, what you're doing with Soul Tribe Studio and all the things that you're creating and that you're facilitating down there.
Yeah, thank you. That's so sweet to say that. And yeah, like I feel like that's right. I mean, there was definitely like a little bit of yoga and things like that happening here before, but there was definitely no studio. There was no hub. Yeah, it was just this little kind of town where people would come down from Canberra and have holidays. So yeah, now we have this incredible, when I say we, I mean, it's just me that runs. I always say we, and I'm like, I don't know who these other people are. But I run this, this thriving studio, and I have a beautiful team of teachers and staff. And yeah, we offer a really wide range of different kinds of yoga classes. We offer free classes. So something that I've been really passionate about from the get-go since I started teaching yoga years and years ago was to be able to offer it to people that can't afford it, not to make it this exclusive thing. So as part of my business model over the last 3 years, I've been able to run 3 free classes a week, like every single week, which I'm just so proud of. And it's by donation, and we donate money to different organizations, and so that's been a really beautiful thing. And so everyone can come, you don't have to have any money whatsoever. People can just come for free. And as well as that, we have like lots and lots of different paid classes, lots of different styles, an amazing team of diverse teachers. I run regular ecstatic dances on the beach, lots of local retreats. So I run retreats every season in the most stunning, amazing locations down here on the far South Coast, even further south from where I am, which is it's just pure magic. I think it just gets more and more beautiful the further south you go. I run teacher trainings. I run yin teacher trainings. I run like 200-hour yoga teacher trainings every year. We run loads of different workshops, like free chanting nights every month. We run film nights at the studio. We've got bushwalking groups. We've got so many different like free community events. Yeah, so much stuff. So much, so much to share. And yeah, I do have an online hub as well with the studio where mine and the teachers' classes are streamed, and we have pre-recorded classes, so people can definitely practice with us if you don't live in Batemans Bay. But if you don't live in Batemans Bay, you should probably move to Batemans Bay because it's the best place ever. But yeah, we've got lots of different options for online as well, online connections. So yeah, that's it. It's probably not it. There's probably loads more that I'm not remembering right now, but yeah, there's lots of stuff happening.
Lots of exciting stuff. And I just want to take a moment to acknowledge you, Claire, because seriously, just from where I've been sitting for the last few years, what you've created down there is such an amazing service to the community. And I know just from hearing feedback from other people and of being down there myself and seeing what you're doing. And mind you, I think I'm due for another visit soon. It is just so incredible what you offer and just your heart and how you're so inclusive. And, Soul Tribe has really become this place where it doesn't matter what walk of life you come from, what you look like, who you are, what your background is, like everyone is welcome. And that is so beautiful. And it brings us back to that, I think, remembrance of what makes us human, that connection, that community, that tribe, that remembering of our true nature and who we really are, and getting to experience that together. And so, yeah, I just wanted to acknowledge you for that and say thank you for everything that you do down there. And also thank you for everything that you brought into my life through our friendship. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, that really means the world to me, and I really value our friendship. And I mean, thank you so much for letting me hop on that Peru ride with you because you could have been like, no, I'm going by myself, go away. And I feel like that was just that whole thing was really, really influential to where I am now. So yeah, I really, really, really appreciate you, and thank you so much for all your support. And yeah, it's been incredible. And I honestly just feel like it all stemmed from taking that big leap, sitting in Merrickville saying like, I want to get out of here, and then just doing it and just jumping into the van and having no idea what I was doing and no plan. That's what led me here. I really feel like if I'd been in Sydney and I was like, right, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to this place called Batemans Bay. I mean, I've never even heard of the place. I'm going to open up a studio. Like, if I'd had it all planned out, I really don't think it would have worked whatsoever. Such a blessing to be able to just jump and know that we are all supported. And I just truly believe that when we do what we love and we're letting ourselves be called, and I think Rumi puts it so beautifully. He says, let yourself be drawn by the strange pull of what you really love, because it will not lead you astray. And I really just think that's it. It's like, it's not even me, it's just happening through me.
Yes. What a beautiful way, or a beautiful note to end the conversation on. That resonates with me a lot. And just on a side note, actually, I wouldn't have had it any other way. It was so much better going to Peru and sharing that experience with you, like it's something that not everyone, it's not something that happens every day for everyone. And so we get to really understand, our experiences on a deeper level and share that. So that was great that you're like, yep, I'm coming. Good. So good. And Claire, so as we wrap up the conversation today, do you want to let everyone know where they can find you and connect with you online?
Yeah, for sure. So I have an Instagram, it's Soul Tribe Studio. I also have a personal Instagram, Clare Lovelace. So I share all of my retreats and workshops and teacher trainings and everything that I'm doing, mostly on Soul Tribe, but feel free to follow me on both. My Clare Lovelace Instagram is usually just photos of me prancing around on beaches in bikinis. So if you're into that, go for it. And then you can definitely go to the website. So it's soultribestudio.com.au. And check out what we're doing on there. I would really recommend joining the newsletter. It's not just your average boring newsletter, but I write really interesting and sometimes funny stories about my life and what I'm up to. So if you like to read, then I really recommend signing up for the Soul Tribe newsletter, because it's just a beautiful story that you get delivered into your mailbox every couple of weeks.
Perfect. I will put everything in the show notes for everyone so that they can go check you out. And if you want to, go and connect with Claire and, find out more about, what she's all about. There's, a lot of insightful and inspiring and funny and creative endeavors that you're sharing on there. So yeah, make sure you go check Claire out, and you can find those show notes at tinyhouseconversations.com. And Claire, just want to say thank you so much for your time today, darling, and for sharing so generously and beautifully, your stories, your experiences, your wisdom. And yeah, it's just been beautiful to have you on the show today, and I love you. So thank you again.
Thank you so much. I'm so honored. I'm really, really, really happy to be here. And I just think what you're doing is so incredible, just sharing this work with so many people. Yeah, I think you're amazing.
Oh, thank you. And if you're listening to this episode, thanks so much for taking the time to hang out with us. If you want more Tiny House Conversations, I release a new episode every Thursday. So make sure you hit the subscribe button and you'll know exactly when the latest episode is live. And until next time, we will see you soon. Hey, Tiny Lifers, thanks so much for listening. And before you go, one of the best ways to support this podcast is to share the love. That way I can keep bringing you more valuable tiny house conversations to help you on your own tiny journey. So make sure you head over to Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening to this episode and leave a 5-star rating and review. Thanks so much in advance. I appreciate you, and see you in the next session.